What's up guys? In this video today, I want to talk to you about why I got rid of my 5D Mark IV for the Canon EOS R. So over the past year, I've been shooting with my Sony A7 III and I love the mirrorless ecosystem. I love having eye autofocus. I love having face tracking and video. I loved all of those features about my Sony A7 III. And I never completely switched over to Sony. I always kept a Canon camera, and I picked up a 5D Mark IV a couple months back and used it for a long time, and I just wasn't happy with the results I was getting with my autofocus in photos. So for video, it really wasn't my favorite look that I was getting out of the camera, and I really wanted more flexibility like I get with my Sony A7 III. Hence why I picked up a Canon EOS R. So after selling my 5D Mark IV, I didn't have to put in any more money to get this camera. I have kept some Sigma Art lenses over the past year because I used them with my 5D Mark IV a lot. And I'm able to use my MC11 adapter on my Sony, and I can still use these with really good autofocus. So it was a no-brainer for me that if I wanted to get another Canon camera, that the EOS R was probably gonna be that. So this video is about my initial impressions of this camera from having a 5D Mark IV and a Mark III. And I started out with an 80D, so I really love the flip screen on this thing. Of course, it being touchscreen is really nice too. My biggest thing between this and the A7 III is the color codec. That's one of the biggest things I've realized and using this camera. So with the Sony A7 III, of course I get full frame 4K and it's amazing. And I get a crop 4K in this camera. It's a bit of a bummer, but there are pros and cons to both cameras, which is why I own both of them. So with this camera, I can push the colors around so much more than I can with my A7 III. And if I ever get a Atomos Ninja 5 or any other external recorder, I can use C-Log and get 10-bit 422 externally. With S-Log 2 on Sony, I really hate the way it color grades. I've used it on a few videos before so that I could get more dynamic range. And in the end, after doing all the work, I had to use it because it's the profile that I shot in. But overall, I really hated the look. It was very grainy, a lot of color noise in it. And when I shot C-Log in 8-bit with the EOS R, it was just such a clean image. I really love the way it looked, and it's pretty amazing. Now, some new updates with this camera that I've come to learn is that I can get eye autofocus in video now, which is pretty awesome. My Sony A7 III doesn't do that yet. I know that the Sony A7R IV that just came out has that feature, and I think Sony is gonna make great strides in the future with that. And I'm so glad that Canon has added more features to this camera with the latest updates that's come with it. So the biggest reason I switched to this from my 5D Mark IV primarily is photos. Even though I don't have 2 card slots, it only has 1. It's a great camera. It has eye autofocus just like my Sony, and I'm able to get those super crispy images when I'm taking portraits and all that, and it really just makes me happy. And really, this camera feels so good in the hand. It's not like my A7 III where your pinky hangs off and it doesn't feel that comfortable. And I feel like if I'm holding it handheld, I definitely need a battery grip. I don't feel that way with this camera, and I really like it. I definitely get way better battery life out of my Sony than I do with this camera, but overall, I feel like the usability of this camera is pretty similar to the A7 III. You can map out your custom functions anywhere you want. Mirrorless cameras are very customizable, and I really like that about it. Another feature I really like about this camera, this sensor is covered when you change lenses, and that makes it so much easier to change lenses in outdoor situations when you're shooting maybe some client work outdoors. If you're changing lenses with this camera, you're not going to get near as much dust on your sensor like I do with my Sony. I constantly have to clean and blow out my Sony and make sure that I keep my sensor clean. And I've seen so many YouTubers with Sony cameras, and they go out on an adventure, they don't take a cleaning kit with them, and maybe from swapping lenses once or twice, they get a speck of dust on their sensor, and it's noticeable throughout the rest of the whole video. The lenses that I have that I'm using with this are the Sigma Art 35 1.4, which I have here now. I also have the 85 1.4 Sigma Art and the version 1 70-200 f2.8 Canon lens. Even though this is not a native RF mount, it's still really fast. And of course, if you've used a Sigma Art lens before, you know how noisy they are, especially when you're shooting video. None of that's changed. It's still pretty noisy. I still get blazing fast autofocus. I get the eye tracking, and I get a lot of those expandable focus points, just like I do with my Sony. Some of the features that I kind of don't like about this camera, I would say it's the function bar, and of course you've heard everyone talk about it. I guess a drawback, or one of the things that I don't like about this coming from the 5D Mark IV, is not having a joystick. But overall, with a mirrorless camera and being able to look on the actual screen instead of the viewfinder to take photos, I can actually just tap wherever I want to focus. It's pretty convenient. I've done it before on my Sony A7 III, and you just kind of get used to these things. These are some things that you're going to have to, you know, take back from with this camera. You're gonna make some sacrifices with this, like having a crop in 4K and whatnot. I had a lot of people ask me questions about the Sony A7 III versus this. I had a few questions saying, what do you think about the crop in 4K on this versus the Sony? I say, if features like shooting 120 frames per second in 1080, having full frame 4K, and superior low light performance, if those things are a big factor to you, I would say definitely go with the Sony A7 III. It's a great run and gun camera. Once you learn the ecosystem, it's not scary at all coming from Canon. If you're a portrait photographer who maybe wants some of the newer features, I think the Canon EOS R is a great camera. I really love it so far. I've never truly picked up a 5D Mark IV and whatever and just went out on a shoot with it, came back and said, oh man, I actually love this camera. But in this case, with this camera, I actually did. All of the portraits I've taken with this so far have been tack sharp, in focus, even with adapted glass and even with adapted Sigma Art glass, not even the Canon brand. These are just my initial impressions of this camera. I've probably been babbling a little bit, but anyway, I hope this helps someone out. Maybe if you're thinking of buying a Sony A7 III or buying a EOS R, or if you're even thinking about switching from a 5D Mark IV to the EOS R, I hope this video kind of helped you out a little bit. Thank you for watching this video. If you stuck through it this long, you might as well go ahead and subscribe. I may drop some more content about this in the future. If you have any questions or anything you would like to see maybe in a future video, let me know and I will answer some of those questions in another video. And maybe I can even do a comparison with the Sony A7 III and the Canon EOS R in relativity to photo experience shooting with it, and maybe a little bit on the video side as well. My name is Andrew. Thank you guys for watching this, and I'll see you next time. Peace. So right now I'm packing up and riding the one wheel home. But I forgot to mention, if you guys are using the Sony A7 III or the EOS R, comment below, let me know what your thoughts are about the camera. And also, if you don't own either of these, which one do you think you would pick based off of this video? I'm going to do another video in the future with a further in-depth comparison between the two. So thank you guys for watching this. See you next time.